15th of Av.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. All right. L'chaim, l'chaim. Did you get the second page down there? Just have one?
One.
Okay.
Backwards or back to some.
All right, you'll be all right for a minute.
Okay.
All right, so Lo hayom tovim liYisrael kachamisha ba'av v'kiyom HaKippurim. The Mishna in Tainus, which says kind of a shocking statement, there was no Yomim Tovim for the Jewish people like the 15th of Av and Yom HaKippurim. These are the greatest days. V'isa b'Gemara, and the Gemara states over there, B'Shlema Yom HaKippurim. It makes sense if you're going to say Yom Kippur, Mishum de'is beis slichu mechila, because it has this quality called forgiveness and being forgiven for all your sins. Yom Shenidnu bo luchos acharonos. In addition, Yom Kippurim is a holiday where the second tablets were given, right? So it's mamash, something happened on this day. It's worthy of being a holiday like no other. Ela Tu B'Av, Mahi. But what's Tu B'Av? What does it have going for it? V'mataretz b'Tu B'Av iru kama inyanim tovim, right? And it lists a few things over there that happened on Tu B'Av, that it says that Yom Sheyatiru Shvatim Levoze Bazeh. It was the day that the tribes were allowed to remarry each other. In other words, there's a certain calamity that happened with the tribe of Benjamin, and they were going to basically not allow him to marry into the rest of Am Yisrael. So they allowed the tribes to marry in together. It was also the days that the women would go out in the fields, right? And the men would choose a wife, and so it speaks about a few inyanim over there. But in general, tzrich lahavin ma'u godel ha'ilui de me'oros ha'elu. What's so great about these things? And it's not like it's slicha v'kapara. It's not the 10 Commandments were given. Mipnei zeh hayom to the Tu B'Av hu gadol yoser mishara yom tov. And for these things, it's considered a greater Yom Tov than all other Yom Tovim, because it says in the Mishna states there were no Yom Tovim like the 15th of Av. So what really is so great about these things that puts it on such a level that it's greater than the 3 festivals? The mashal. Ubefrat shemipashtus haloshin, particularly the simple language where it says Lo hayomim tovim liYisrael kachamisha asar ba'av. It says there were no Yomim Tovim like the 15th of Av. Mashma Shugadol Yosher Mikol Yomim Tovim. That it's greater than all the Yomim Tovim. Gam Shlosha Ragalim. It's even a higher thing than Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Right? Who would have thought? 15th of Av. It's greater than the 3 Yomim Tovim. And this is not some Chassidish Perush over here. It says it in the Mishnah. Right? Gam Tzrich Lahavin. We also have to understand the mizeh shelo hayu, etc. This that it says there were no Yom Tovim, kachamisha asar ba'av v'Yom Kippurim, like these 2 days. Mashma shetu ba'av v'Yom Kippurim shaychim ze lezeh. It also seems to imply that the Yom Kippur is connected with Tu B'Av, in that it groups them together. And what's the similarity between these 2 days? V'gam tzrich lahavin. We have to understand why this statement comes as a conclusion of the Masechta of Tainus, right at the end, the last Mishnah of Tainus, the Gemara of fasting. Because seemingly Tainus and Yom Tov, Bifrat Yom Tov Gadol B'Yoser, particularly a Yom Tov of this caliber, which we're now seeing as the greatest of all the Yom Tovim, Shelo HaYom Tovim Kamoso, there was nothing like it. Hem hafachim, they're seemingly totally opposites, right? So why is this Mishnah found in Tainus when it's a Gemara of fasting? Here we're learning about the greatest simcha. They're seemingly opposites. Okay, so should we go over these questions again? Just in short, what's so great about Tu B'Av Bichlal? The things that it seemingly lists in the Gemara that tell us what's so great about it don't seem to really have what it takes to make it the greatest holiday. Secondly, it implies that it's a greater holiday than the 3 festivals. And that it's connected with Yom Kippurim because they're brought together. There was no holidays like it and Yom Kippur, so there must be a connection with them. And why is it brought in the Gemara of Tainus, which is seemingly the opposite discussion of describing the greatest holidays? Yeah? Okay, so going on here. Ba'inyan hu, the Ikra Yom Tov, the Chamish Asar Ba'av, that the main Yom Tov here, Kamuva Ba'amaymer Shemevar Inyan Chamisha Asar Ba'av Shel Admor Marashab, like it's brought in the Maimer of the Rebbe Rashab, when he's describing the Inyan of Tu B'Av, and he says over there, Ki az hu shleimus milui halavana. His description is that it's at that time, it's the totality of the fullness of the moon. Shenyanim sheiru b'chamisha asar ba'av hem kamo totzaos me'inyanu ha'ikari shel yom zeh. That all the 5 things that it mentions over there, which happened on Tu B'Av, really, they're all a outcome of the main thing, which is that it's the fullness of the moon. Shleimus milei halavana. There's everything. That's really what the holiday is all about. Simply, it's a full moon, and all the things that happened were an outcome of the fact that it was a full moon. So it explains in the Maimer, the Rebbe Rashab's Maimer over there. Da'agam shebechol tu bechodesh shu milei halavana. That so you might say. Every month has a full moon. Why all of a sudden is this the greatest holiday of all holidays? Simply because it's the 15th of the month. So even though every holiday has a 15th of the month, a full moon, nonetheless, the real great advantage of having a full moon, it's really that it gets full after it was gone into a state of lack. Because what are you filling up? You're filling up the lack of the moon. So the whole, in general, every month, the greatness of the fact that the moon becomes full is because it comes to complete and fill in what was lacking in that month due to the absence of the full moon.
The only thing better than a full moon is a new moon, right?
A new moon?
But it's dark.
I'm not sure. It seems like that's basically... okay. You're saying the new moon is...
No, I'm really just saying that whatever's next is the best.
I see. But in general, though, there is this consistent concept that the Rosh Chodesh, it's also the union of the same concept because it goes from nothing to something. When you said the new moon, you mean not the new moon. The new moon, I think is there's
Chodesh.
Right. So there is such a thing as the new. What is it? When is the news when there's no moon? What do they call it? The new moon, right?
Yeah, the new moon is the day or two into the sliver.
The sliver is the new moon.
That's the new moon.
Oh, but there's a day when there's like no moon, basically, right?
So that's like Arab Rosh.
Right. So what I'm saying is that the Indian of the new moon is similar in that it fills a lack, right? In other words, the idea of the moon is starting to grow. It's a big growth because it's coming from nothing to something. So that's like sort of like a powerful, renewal, obviously. But nonetheless, the real renewal doesn't come until the moon is full. So in that capacity, when it comes to comparing the first of the month to the 15th of the month, it's pretty much consistent that the 15th of the month brings into fruition all the things that were latent in this little seed of the Rosh Chodesh. So the whole idea, though, is that the replenishing is only as significant as the diminish that came before it. The fullness that comes after lack, he shleimus nailis yoser. It's much greater of a fullness than just being whole in your own right. In other words, if a person becomes a billionaire when he was already a multimillionaire, he has a certain shleimus, but it doesn't come from a state of lack. If a person was a poor, and he becomes a billionaire, his billions are, in a certain sense, a greater level of perfection. They're a greater level of completion. Because they take him out of a greater loss. The whole idea of filling yourself up is you're filling yourself up based on the loss that you had. So if you're lost, you didn't have any loss, you just achieved like a sort of perfection of what was already whole, it's not nearly as significant as a shleimus, as a wholeness, as fixing something that was broken, as it were. Kiyadua, as it's known, Haklal ba'aliyas v'yuridos. There's a principle when it comes to going up and going down, elevation and descent. The aliyah shla'achar yarida hi aliyah l'mayla yoser. Ma'adarga shlifnei yarida. That the aliyah, the elevation that comes after a descent, is an elevation much, much higher midarga shlifnei yarida than the place that you stood before you went down. Right? In other words, you started in one place, you go down in order to go back up even higher. The kol shayurida hi biyoser, and the lower you go down in your descent, haliyah hi biyoser. You go higher when you attach yourself to the elevation part, right? So the whole idea is that we're talking about the shleimus, that it's like a recovering from the fall. So even though every moon is a recover from the fall, and therefore every full moon, which is the replenishing of the fall, it goes to the highest point of that month. But the lower you fall in that month, therefore the higher the rebound is. Right? And therefore the full moon of Av is the greatest full moon of the year. Right? And therefore it's really the greatest day of the year, as it says in the Mishna. Right? Again, this is Yaron and I have this running joke basically from that every day is the greatest day of the year. But it actually says, Pashut in the Mishnah, there are no greater days for the Jewish people than the 15th of Av. So let's get it out on the table. What's the deal? It's because anyway, every full moon is basically the pinnacle of what can happen to a month, right? Because it's the full revelation. And in this case, it's replenishing the greatest fall, and the rebound from a fall goes higher based on how low the fall is. And therefore, the real quality of the concept of a full moon in general is kept for Tu B'Av. He wins the prize. That this of all full moons is the greatest of all, but it does more for a full moon than any other full moon could do. Because in the month of Av, Hayurida da Lavana, the Israel Domin Lavana, the descent of the moon, and it's of course that the Jewish people are compared to the moon, right? What do you mean we're compared to the moon? In general, why do we count the moon as like sort of our main timekeeper? Because the moon and the Jewish people are like one. We are like a reflection of the sun, right? The moon is like Malchus, the sun is like Chochmah or Hashem. So we transmit the light of the sun to the world, right? Just like the light of Hashem to the world, just like the moon transmits a ray of light of God to the world. So the Jewish people are compared to the moon, and therefore we also have these ups and downs. We're in a state of Gullus. The Hashem is in the Shekhinah is in Gullus, but it has these rebounds, etc. So in Av, where the descent of the moon, and i.e. the Jewish people, is the greatest, Yerida Gedula B'Yoser is the greatest descent. L'chein Aliyah de Tu B'Av. Therefore, the elevation of Av is also the greatest elevation of the Jewish people. In other words, this really is the best month for the Jewish people as well, because that rebound is the highest. Shla'achar Yerida de Tisha B'Av. This elevation of Tu B'Av, which comes as a result of the descent of Tisha B'Av. Hi Aliyah Gedola B'Yoser. This is the greatest Aliyah that you can have. Vezeu lo ayu yamim tovim liYisrael, and that's what it means that there were no holidays for the Jewish people. Kechamisha Asar B'Av, like the 15th of Av. Shu Yom Tov Gadol Yoser Gam HaYamim Tovim de Pesach V'Sukkos, where we're saying that this is a greater holiday, literally, than Pesach and Sukkos. Av Shegam Yamim Tovim Eile Hem B'Tu B'Chodesh, even though those Yom Tov are also on the 15th of the month. Right? So in other words, Pesach and Shavuos and Pesach and Sukkot have the same quality of being on the full moon. And that's the reason why our holidays are on the full moon, for the exact same reason that we just discussed. It really is the pinnacle of the revelation of that month. And when it comes to Tishrei, when it comes to Nisan, those are like some of the greatest months, and therefore the fullness of those months, the first month, the seventh month, represents Pashut, the holidays on the calendar of the Jewish people. But still, they're not as great as the 15th of Av. Ki Aliyah, the Tubas Nisan, because the elevation that happens in the 15th of Nisan, which is Pesach, Avshi Bala Acharei HaYerid de Galus Mitzrayim, So you'll say to yourself, wait a second, the 15th of the month of Nisan is pretty, it follows a pretty big Yerida, like maybe even a bigger Yerida, because it comes as a result of what? Yetzias Mitzrayim. The descent of Gullus of Mitzrayim, which basically is officially the worst Gullus of all, right? All Gulluses that come after are only based on it. So why isn't that a rebound to a higher level even than Av? So he says an interesting thing here. Hare kashiyatsu Yisrael Mitzrayim haisas chalas avodasam dargas tzadikim. That when the Jewish people came out of Mitzrayim, right, the level of their avoda that they began was the avoda of tzadikim. The ger shenizgayer kekatan shenolad dami. Because there's a principle that a convert is like a child that's born anew, right? Someone who converts, he's not really the same person that he was the day before. To the point that even al pi halacha, there's many things that depend on that. All of a sudden they have they're not really related in the same way technically to their family, right? And so forth. It's they're like mamash, a brand new person. And lechein, and therefore, when we came out of Mitzrayim, we were like converts, and therefore, we weren't really the same person that we were when we were in Mitzrayim, right? And therefore, the Aliyah of the 15th of Nisan, Einu behemshech kol kach, it's not really a continuation so much, la yerida shayis lifnei zeh, to the descent that happened before it. In other words, we descended tremendously, but the person that took the ascent from that descent was not the same person that went on the descent. So you can't say that it was really a rebound from that descent, because by the time we started ascending and experiencing like the newness of the result of that, we weren't the same person, because we were converts.
Like a new program. We in the Yerida we converted and then we came out new.
No, the coming out was the conversion, right? Like in other words, the day of, let's say, the 14th of Nisan, right? Or really the 15th of Nisan, I guess, by in Chatzos, like that moment of the 15th, we came out. We experienced this tremendous revelation. But who experiences this revelation? We were not called a Baal Tshuva. We were called Tzadikim. We started the avodas of Tzadikim, right? Because we weren't considered to have been this sinful nation that had done tshuva and now is starting a new fresh count towards receiving the Torah. We were like a brand new spanked baby boy, that never had a past when we started going towards the Torah. Like that was the beginning of Am Yisrael. So we didn't have like sort of a darkness and a descent that this was now the filling in of. This is a new person who's starting off a new life. Right? So therefore you can't say that it's really the result of our descent in the same way. So what about Gamal? He says, but there's still, then it begs the question of Sukkot actually. Gamal aliyah the two betishrei. So then let's look at the 15th of Tishrei. Here you go, you need one of these. And that's called Sukkot. What's the 15th of Tishrei? It's called Sukkot. Av shayom tov de Sukkos ba behemshech l'tshuva v'kapara d'yom HaKippurim. Right, so the 15th of Tishrei has the same quality of being the shleimus of what happened prior, right? In other words, it like brings the what was lacking in that month to a state of fullness. And what was the sort of downside of that month, I guess you could say, or the part of the month that required fixing, is that it's a continuation of Yom Kippur. Right? So basically you could say that all the tshuva that we did comes to fruition at that time. That seems like the 15th of the month there would theoretically compete with the month of Av for the greatest turnaround, right? Because basically all your sins are forgiven, and it is connected to the same person you were before. It's not like in Pesach, all your sins are forgiven because you're a new man. Literally, you're not the same person. Here, you're a person that's been forgiven. So, seemingly, the revelation of the 15th of Tishrei should compete, at least, if not win. He says, no, there's also like a trick here. The Aliyah Atzma מהמצב הבלתי רצוי שהיה מקודם הוא ביום הכיפורים. No, because really what's happening is like this. The actual aliyah that takes place from the bad situation that you were in, it actually already takes place on Yom Kippur. In other words, what are we talking about here? You're going from a state of wicked to forgiven. But and that's the Indian of Tishrei, basically, right? Like you do a tremendous level of tshuva on Rosh Hashanah, hopefully, and it's a day of tremendous repentance, and Rosh Hashanah doesn't really end until Yom Kippur, because it's 10 days of tshuva. So those are definitely days that you're coming from darkness to light, and you're trying to turn over all the negative things you did. You're trying to, you're embracing the level not of tzaddikim, but the level of Baal Tshuva. It's the opposite time of year of Pesach. Pesach is like we have a clean slate. Rosh Hashanah is not that we have a clean slate. It's mamash turning darkness into light. It's just that what? Yom Kippur is already the day that the Aliyah happens. In other words, in the case of Tu B'Av, right? Until in the month of Av, you only get out of the darkness of the sadness of the month of Av on the 15th of the month, right? Whereas in Tishrei, the Aliyah, which is the result of your descent, it already takes place on Yom Kippur. Your sins are forgiven on Yom Kippur. You're done. It's basically you've achieved tshuva, right? So the whole Aliyah that you're shooting for has already taken place on Yom Kippur. So the 15th of the month is not actually representative there of the Aliyah that follows the Yerida. So what is it then? It's just that all the things that you already achieved on Yom Kippur, they come to revelation at the time of Sukkot, right? So that, but they didn't actually occur then. In other words, the actual elevation and it already took place on Yom Kippur. So what you're really doing is you're just revealing the things that happened on the 10th of the month. You're revealing the Yom Kippur. So it does have a tremendous level of revelation, but it's not actually the elevation doesn't happen at that time. So if you want to look at it, in other words, go back to Pesach for a second. It's an interesting little trio here. Pesach, the elevation did happen on the 15th of the month, right? They were in exile and in a state of descent right up until the 15th of the month. It's just that the 15th of the month, they became a new person. So you can't really compare the descent to the ascent. Whereas in the 15th of Av, it's a similar thing, right? The elevation came on the 15th. So, and therefore it was that day alone which is the rebound. But in Tishrei, the real day of the rebound was the 10th of the month. That's when. So in other words, the springboard or the rebound that took place, it was as much as what you were able to get from the 1st of the month to the 10th of the month, which is not really a full moon. There wasn't a full measure of completion. It's just that on the 15th of the month, you find out what actually you put in your bag on the 10th of the month. It's a revelation of what took place on the 10th. You get all this? You want to not
why the Jews are such good lawyers.
Agreed. Okay. So this is the way all these things fit together.
Where is the justification?
Justification in what?
It's saying that things are revealed but not elevated. Or what's the evidence for that in the text?
They're elevated but not revealed. Actually, right on Yom Kippur. You're talking about Yom Kippur?
No, I'm talking about Sukkot.
Right. Okay. So Sukkot is that. Great. So you asked the perfect question, because we're at the footnote 16, right? That's exactly where we left off. Is the footnote 16? Basically, the Rabbi makes this assertion, but he doesn't bring the textual proof to he does in the footnote. He says, "Ki yedua be'inyan bekes liyom chagenu," right? That there's a concept of kesa means the covering over of the moon on Rosh Hashanah. But the Rosh Hashanah is basically the moon is concealed. It's just the beginning of the revelation of the moon, right? Mm-hmm. So that's called kesa, right? Which means covered over. And what is it covered over for? Liyom chagenu, for the day of Sukkot. And it was ultimately all the things that happened in that you achieved on Rosh Hashanah, they're going to come to a state of revelation on the day of Sukkot, right? But really, what happens first is that there is a, hold on a second. Yeah. What happens first is that you already achieve your forgiveness of what Rosh Hashanah is supposed to do. And Rosh Hashanah is sort of like a you're aiming for some perfect year, right? You're asking for all your blessings, and you're asking Hashem to write you in the book of life, right? So anything you're going to achieve, it's sealed by Yom Kippur. There's nothing more you can achieve, right? So what's concealed in Rosh Hashanah comes to revelation on Sukkot, Yom Chagenu, but it actually already gets taken care of on Yom Kippur. It's not the best textual evidence here, but he basically brings out the point that we're making, which is that the revelation of Sukkot is what is going on Yom Kippur. I mean, on Rosh Hashanah. It's just that the shleimus of what is Rosh Hashanah already gets sealed at Yom Kippur. So anything that's going to be shining from the day of Sukkot, it's really shining the product of what came out of Yom Kippur. Not like something that happened post Yom Kippur. There's nothing new. There's no new levels of elevation that are taking place after Yom Kippur, because that's the day that the whole project was sealed. Only thing that happens, you don't know what you brought down yet when it's Yom Kippur. You achieve some elevation, but you don't know what it is.
There was this idea you can still do tshuva up until Sukkot, after Yom Kippur.
Up until Sukkot, I mean, truth is, there's you could do tshuva until Hanukkah. I mean, it's not like that it's totally sealed. But in terms of the idea of the whole normative process of doing tshuva in Tishrei, I mean, the book is sealed. You say Ne'ilah, the gates are closed. I mean, there's some little tikkunim that you can do and fix things that nothing stands in the way of tshuva. But in terms of like the structure, I guess, of the month, officially it's over on Yom Kippur. Right? If we're going to say there's more tshuva to be done, I have no problem with that. But it's already like you're darshaning something in there.
I guess there's more balance for Tu B'Av as there isn't all the stuff going on before.
There's more what? Balance. I mean, yes and no. I think what he's trying to say is that the descent of Tishrei is great, because you're basically dealing with all your sin as well, right? I mean, you might not make it through another year. I mean, this is pretty intense stuff. It's just that it only balances to the 10th. In other words, I think what he's trying to get to is that the Yerida of Av is going down until you get to the 15th. So that's the balance, because there's 4 more days, right? Whereas when you're going down in Tishrei until the elevation, which is on Yom Kippur, like the forgiveness happens. Like the payday is the 10th. It doesn't keep going down. It starts to go up at that point. The elevation happens on Yom Kippur. So what doesn't finish happening is showing you how much light and joy was a result of your aliyah. So there's 4 days of like experiencing the fullness of your aliyah that you already had, right? But the aliyah has already taken place and, so to speak, done on the 10th.
23%.
Only 23%. Okay. So, Masha'en Kain, going back in the text, the second line from the bottom after footnote 16, second line from the bottom of the first paragraph. He says, Masha'en Kain aliyah shla'achrei yirida the techilas chodesh Av. Not so, and as Yom Kippur is opposed to this notion that the aliyah that comes after the descent of the beginning of the month of Av, it's different than Tishrei. Shaliyah atzma hi b'Tu B'Av, that the actual elevation itself takes place on Tu B'Av. In other words, you're still going down until you get to the 15th of Av. So this is already like getting very technical, but I think we have to do it. In footnote 17, so what are we saying? That you're really going down until you get to the 15th. Like the aliyah itself happens on the 15th. All the while I was saying this, I was having like a secret problem with this. The Rabbi addresses this secret problem in footnote 17, which is Av haschalas aliyah himiyara achrei Tisha B'Av. in other places, we discussed that that's not really true. We just said that the Aliyah actually begins right after the 9th of Av. So if that's the case, that the Aliyah already starts like on the 10th of Av, so then it's exactly like Yom Kippur, and we're back to where we started. He says, okay, but the shleimus of the Aliyah Atzma is B'tu B'Av. This is what he says. He says, the fullness of the difference is like this. It's very subtle. The fullness of the Aliyah in Av is on the 15th, which means you start going up on the 10th, and you keep going up, up, up. You're not done going up. And in the 15th, you go up the highest. You're still going up. In other words, so it's the shleimus of the elevation. Whereas, what's the difference on Tishrei? Is that when you hit Yom Kippur, you've gone up to the highest. You're not going any higher than that. You just don't know what you have. So that is going to reveal itself, and it's going to reveal itself little by little until you get to the 15th. In full, you'll know what happened on Yom Kippur. But you've already gone to the top of where you're going to go when you get to Yom Kippur. Whereas in Tu B'Av, there is a big shift that takes place already the day after Tisha B'Av. You do start going up. It's not just keep doing down, 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 like he said in the Mimer. Now he changed it in the footnote. You actually do start going up, but you haven't gone up to the top of where you're getting to yet. And therefore, I guess the rest of the month of Av is sort of like, you start to, I don't know if maybe the rest of the month of Av, he doesn't get to it there, but like the top of the Aliyah and the fullness of the revelation of that Aliyah, they all take place on the 15th. You follow the difference there? Okay.
So how will that change this year when we have the Beis Hamikdash?
The ultimate revelation of that is the Beis Hamikdash, basically.
But I mean, it'll just start building like a normal month in the beginning, and it'll be still at its height on the 15th. We just won't have the Yerida to the 9th.
Well, the thing is because the Yerida of the month of the 9th of Av is not per se, God forbid, the Yerida that we're going to experience this month of Av. Right? It's the fact that the month of Av was the Yerida of the whole world, basically. So it's not going away just because the Beis Hamikdash came back. It's going to be always the source of the ascent that we had, bouncing back from the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. So I mean, just
so
like
once we pass that place, I don't mean the date of the 9th. Once we pass that
era,
Yerida, right? That era,
right.
Then it has to be even a higher month.
I mean, what you're saying sort of reminds me of we say that every 15th of Nisan, right, or 21st of Nisan, whatever, when the sea splits, let's say, or when we go out of Mitzrayim, the same energy comes to the world,
right?
Even though we don't see the splitting of the sea, right? Because it's not like a 4th of July, we're just like commemorating a date. We're commemorating a certain spiritual energy that comes in on that day. So I would say it's a similar thing. In other words, the transformative quality of turning like absolute destruction, absence of divinity into like, the highest return and rebound is going to happen every year, even when there's a Beis Hamikdash. In other words, that's a tremendous simcha of turning darkness into light, which just because we're not going to see the miracle every time, every year, it doesn't mean that energy and that power of that simcha is not going to be found in that day. You know what I mean?
But will the loss be found in that day? So what you're saying is it will be still a particle memory of what
in other words,
the loss of that day,
just
the
like
resurrection
today,
of that day or something.
I believe so. In other words, what's the whole thing? Is the simcha of like we learned in the last mimer, of the son who's been exiled coming home and meeting his father, versus the son who's just been sitting on the couch the whole time in the first place, right? So this idea of taking someone out of captivity and bonding with them, there's a great simcha that you don't find otherwise. So I believe that we're going to have that level of rejoicing continuously. It's going to be like every day we're seeing the sun come out of captivity. That peak of simcha is not going to go away, because we're going to remember. There's a whole concept. We're going to remember, what it was like to be in Mitzrayim. In other words, it doesn't really leave us. There's a notion of there's a Pesach Sheni mimer that we learn every year, where it talks about sort of two things, that when you're in exile, you have to really have your eyes on the redemption, on the idea that even though right now you're in a state of like Mitzrayim, you have to know you're going to be in a state of a perfect tzaddik one day. So it gives you the impetus and the empowerment to get out of your status. That unless you know you're going to achieve some kind of perfection, you're not even going to be able to take one step. So that's the idea of like Pesach Rishon when you're still in Nisan. And Pesach Sheni is that even though now you're out of Mitzrayim, right? Because Pesach Sheni, they're in Iyar, they're already walking through the desert, they're like approaching the Torah, but it's still called Pesach because you have to remember where you came from. So he's saying when you're in the darkness, you have to really remember the light, and when you're in the light, you also have to remember the darkness, because each one has something the other one doesn't have. When the darkness has something, which is that it gives you a certain jump, a certain urgency, because you're running away from evil, that you don't have when all times are good. So the whole quality of the future redemption is going to have both of these things. We're going to still have that kernel of bitterness that we're going to remember to make it all so sweet that we're visiting our only son who's come out of exile every day. So we're not going to forget, as it were. Okay. So to conclude this paragraph, we wound up just saying that we are still championing the month of Av as the greatest aliyah, because even though similar to Tishrei, it's already a turnaround from day 10 in the month. The difference is that day 10 begins the elevation of Av, but it keeps on elevating, going higher until the 15th. Whereas in Tishrei, it stops going higher on the 10th, and you just get the more and more revelation of what you've already accomplished going forward. L'chein hayom tov de chamisha sarva'av gadol yosem yom tov de Pesach and Sukkot. And therefore, after all this conversation, we can conclude that really the 15th of Av is a greater holiday than Pesach and Sukkot, which anyway it says in the Mishnah. But if you don't explain it al pi Chassidus, it's sort of just like a closed, strange statement that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Base. Adayin tzrich lahavin, but we still have to understand. Harei Yom Tov de Pesach v'Sukkos, de Chag HaShavuos, hu min haTorah. What are you talking about? Let's just call out the obvious. Yom Tov of Pesach, Sukkos, and Shavuos, just in parentheses, they're from the Torah. They're mamish divine holidays written into the Torah. Ve'echev shasha Yom Tov de Chamishasar ba'Av, and how is it possible that the Yom Tov of the 15th of Av, Yeh Gadol Yoser Ma Yom Tov de Shlosh Regalim, how can it be greater than the three festivals when it's not from the Torah? And not only is it not from the Torah, the things that made it a Yom Tov happened far after the Torah was written. Gam tzrich lahavin the mizeh she'omer lo hayu yomim tovim liYisrael kachamisha asar ba'av kiyom HaKippurim. Additionally, this that we say that there's no greater days than the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur, shemakdim chamisha asar ba'av liyom HaKippurim, that we have to be exacting in the words. It puts the 15th of Av before Yom Kippur in the Mishnah, right? It says there was no greater days than the 15th of Av, and then secondarily Yom HaKippurim comes after that. Av sheyom tov de chamisha asar ba'av nischadesh, even though the 15th of Av holiday was nischadesh, it came about new. The fikol tamim sheba'Gemara, according to all the reasons the Gemara stated that it was a holiday, they were all things that happened after the Torah was already written. Kama shanim la'achrei yom tov de Yom HaKippurim, even though the causes for the holiday all happened many years after the holiday of Yom Kippur was already established. So how is it possible that it comes first? Mashma de Yom Tov de Chamisha Asar ba'Av hu naila yoser gam Yom Tov de Yom HaKippurim. So it implies here that the 15th of Av is not only higher than the three festivals which we already got into before, but it's higher also than Yom Kippur, because it comes before Yom Kippur in the statement, even though again Yom Kippur is from the Torah and it happened before. How does it all work? This is very puzzling. But tzrich biur, no, yeah. But tzrich biur, we have to understand harigam b'Yom HaKippurim aliyah matzav bilti ratzoi. Also Yom Kippur has the same sort of quality going for it, that it's an elevation from a negative type of situation, from an unwanted situation. Right, the person's sins and so forth. So we have to understand really how does it outrank even Yom Kippur, when really they have very similar qualities going on, and Yom Kippur has this Indian of being already from the Torah and so forth. So this is what we have to understand. V'yuvan zeh al pi hamavur ba'maimer. So we can understand this tomorrow, I believe. Yeah, because we're going to run out of time. Okay. Shkoyach. Yeah, you want to hand those in then? Unless you want to keep them, it's up to you.